close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine yourself in the warm glow of an ancient Greek evening. The marble streets are cooling after the sun's heat. The sound of distant lyres drifts across the air, and people are gathering in courtyards, baths, and quiet gardens to ease their minds after a long day. Ancient Greece was not only a land of philosophers and warriors, but also a society that valued balance between work and rest, effort and leisure, thought and pleasure. In this journey, we'll explore how the Greeks found peace and relaxation, from soothing baths and music to leisurely symposia filled with wine and conversation. These were more than simple pastimes. They were ways of nurturing the body, the spirit, and the mind. If you're here tonight because sleep doesn't come easily, you're in the right place. This channel, History for Sleep, was created for people like you, people who want to drift off while wrapped in gentle storytelling. As we move through the chapters, let the slow rhythm of history guide you into rest. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another calming history journey. And I'd love to hear from you. Comment below with the time you like to listen in and what historical topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Do you tune in right before bed? While resting in the afternoon? Or maybe on quiet mornings? Your thoughts help shape the stories we tell. So settle in, get comfortable, and allow the ancient world to unfold before you. When we think of ancient Greece, our minds often leap to the bustling agora, the dramatic theaters, or the fierce warriors marching into battle. Yet beneath all the energy and achievements of this remarkable civilization was a deep appreciation for something gentler, the art of rest. The Greeks had a word for leisure, shoal, and it carried a meaning far beyond simple idleness. To them, leisure was not about wasting time. It was about creating the space for reflection, learning, and the nurturing of the spirit. In fact, the modern word school comes from sholp. That in itself tells us something about how the Greeks viewed rest. Leisure was not just for lying still. It was the opportunity to study, to ponder, and to converse. For them, relaxation was intertwined with growth. To be at ease, to have free time, was to open the mind and to refine the soul. But this concept of balance between labor and leisure was not universal. Life in Greece varied depending on whether one lived in Athens, Sparta, or a smaller city-state. In Athens, where philosophy and art thrived, leisure was more often celebrated. Citizens might spend their free hours walking in shaded colonnades, listening to debates, or attending lectures by philosophers who turned thought itself into a form of relaxation. In Sparta, the demands of discipline and military life left less room for personal rest. But even there, pauses in training included music, communal meals, and religious festivals. The Greek sense of relaxation was also deeply tied to rhythm, the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the seasons, and the rhythm of the human body. Work was done in the morning, when the air was cooler. Midday might be spent in shaded courtyards, sipping diluted wine, applying perfumed oils, and waiting for the heat to pass. Evenings were for gathering with friends, playing games, or listening to the soothing tones of a lyre. Leisure flowed into life like the gentle tide, and in this flow, the Greeks found harmony. What is striking is how much they linked leisure to human flourishing. Philosophers like Aristotle wrote that true happiness, or eudaimonia, could not be reached without sholp. To him, relaxation was not laziness, but the highest state of being, because it allowed the mind to focus on truth, beauty, and goodness. Leisure was the soil in which wisdom could grow. At the same time, the Greeks were practical people. They knew that rest was necessary to recover from the demands of farming, sailing, or warfare. But even physical recovery was elevated into something more. A long bath was not just for cleaning the body. It was an act of restoration. A meal shared with friends was not merely eating. It was strengthening bonds. Leisure was always layered with deeper meaning. For ordinary citizens, leisure might look like reclining on a couch after the day's work, listening to simple tunes, or strolling through the marketplace to chat with neighbors. For the wealthy, it could involve elaborate banquets, philosophical symposia, or trips to healing sanctuaries. Yet across all classes, the principle was the same. Rest was part of life's rhythm, not separate from it. The Greeks also connected leisure to nature. The sea, the mountains, and the olive groves were places where people found peace. A fisherman might set aside his nets and simply watch the horizon. A farmer might rest beneath a fig tree, feeling the breeze and listening to cicadas. The harmony of the natural world mirrored the balance they sought within themselves. Even religion shaped leisure. Festivals dedicated to the gods offered days of respite from daily toil. Music, dancing, and processions turned devotion into joy. The gods themselves, the myths reminded people, took time to feast and celebrate. Rest was not just human, it was divine. This Greek idea of leisure may sound familiar because it resonates with our own struggles to balance work and rest. They too asked, how do we use our free time? Do we let it drift away, or do we fill it with meaning? The Greeks leaned toward the latter, crafting leisure into an art form. To relax in ancient Greece was to engage the body, the mind, and the spirit. It was not about shutting out the world, but about being more fully alive within it. Whether through music, philosophy, games, or simple stillness, they understood that life without balance was incomplete. As we begin our journey through their many ways of finding peace, keep this thought in mind. Relaxation was not an afterthought for the Greeks. It was central to the good life. Their word shulp reminds us that free time is not empty time, but a chance to connect with what truly matters. So let us step deeper into their world, where leisure was philosophy, ritual, and daily rhythm, and discover how a civilization known for greatness also cherished the quiet beauty of rest. Water has always held a special place in human culture, not only as a source of life, but as a source of comfort. In ancient Greece, bathing was more than a practical necessity. It was a ritual of restoration, a quiet indulgence woven into the rhythm of daily life. For the Greeks, stepping into water meant stepping into a space of renewal, where the body could find ease and the mind could be refreshed. Unlike the grand public baths of later Rome, Greek bathing culture was simpler, but it carried just as much meaning. In small towns and great cities alike, the experience of bathing shifted depending on setting, purpose, and social role. Sometimes it was a private moment, a personal pause after labor. Other times it was communal, shared among citizens as part of a larger rhythm of society. In many households, especially among the wealthier classes, private bathing was a cherished part of the day. Homes might have clay bathtubs, often shaped in a way that resembled large basins. These tubs were not filled endlessly like our modern baths, but were used with poured water, heated over fire in bronze vessels. Servants or family members would carefully carry the warmed water, pouring it over shoulders and limbs, letting it trickle down in soothing streams. The wealthy often used oils and perfumes after bathing. Olive oil, so central to Greek life, became more than food. It was massaged into the skin, softening it, protecting it, and leaving behind a gentle sheen. Afterward, people scraped away the oil and dirt with a small curved tool called a strigil. This act itself was calming, a slow ritual of cleansing and refreshment. In larger cities, public baths emerged, though on a smaller scale than the massive Roman thermae that would follow centuries later. These Greek baths often combined warm pools with open courtyards. Citizens came not only to clean themselves, but also to pause from the day's demands. The water soothed tired muscles. The atmosphere invited conversation or quiet reflection. Baths were often connected with gymnasia, those centers of training and philosophy. After vigorous exercise, a bath restored balance. Imagine the scene: young men finishing their wrestling or running, then stepping into warm water, rubbing their bodies with oils, and emerging refreshed. In this way, bathing was part of a larger cycle effort followed by rest, labor followed by ease. The Greeks also recognized the therapeutic power of water. Certain natural springs were considered sacred, believed to hold divine healing properties. Pilgrims traveled to these places not only to bathe, but to pray, to offer thanks to the gods, and to seek recovery from illness or weariness. At sanctuaries like those of Asclepius, the god of healing, water played a key role in rituals meant to cleanse both body and spirit. Bathing in ancient Greece was not hurried. It was slow, almost meditative. The warmth of water contrasted with cool marble floors. The fragrance of oils sometimes infused with herbs, like rosemary or lavender, filled the air. Light filtered into courtyards, reflecting gently off water surfaces. These sensations worked together to create calm, a harmony of senses that made bathing deeply restorative. While bathing could be private, it was also social. Friends might meet at the baths just as they met at the marketplace or symposium. Here, stripped of the day's dust and sweat, they could talk more freely, share laughter, or sit quietly together. The shared ritual of bathing reminded Greeks that relaxation was not only personal, it could be communal, strengthening bonds among citizens. The rituals did not end when one stepped out of the water. People wrapped themselves in light cloths, reclined on couches, and allowed themselves to rest. Some enjoyed small snacks, fruit or bread dipped in oil, accompanied by diluted wine. Others listened to soft music or engaged in conversation. The bath was not just the cleansing itself. It was the slow unfolding of comfort that followed. Greek philosophers also saw bathing as more than cleanliness. Some wrote that cleansing the body prepared the mind for clarity. Just as dirt could cloud the skin, distractions could cloud the mind. Bathing, in its rhythm and calmness, was a metaphor for renewal. In cleansing, one also let go of worry and tension. Not all Greeks experienced bathing the same way. The wealthy could afford oils, perfumes, and private tubs. The poor might rely on rivers, fountains, or simple basins in shared spaces. Yet even these simpler forms of bathing carried the same sense of relief. To rinse away sweat after a long day in the fields, to feel cool water on sunburned skin, this was, in its own way, a luxury. Mythology, too, reflected the sacredness of bathing. Goddesses like Aphrodite were said to emerge from the sea, radiant after her watery birth. Stories often describe heroes cleansing themselves in rivers after battle, symbolizing both physical and spiritual renewal. Bathing connected mortals to the cycles of nature and the divine. As we imagine these scenes, it is easy to see why bathing was a cornerstone of Greek relaxation. It was not extravagant. It was simple, slow, and filled with meaning. The pouring of water, the touch of oils, the gentle scraping of the strigil, these were gestures of care, of respect for the body, and of honoring the balance between effort and ease. In many ways, the Greek approach to bathing feels timeless. Even today, we associate baths with calm, healing, and release from tension. When the Greeks leaned back, eyes closed, and let the water wash over them, they were experiencing a peace that is as human now as it was thousands of years ago. So, when you picture ancient Greece, don't just imagine marble temples and busy marketplaces. Picture also the quiet courtyard where someone is bathing by lantern light, the soft sound of water flowing, and the fragrance of herbs drifting in the air. That was Greece too, a place where the simple act of bathing became a doorway into relaxation, healing, and tranquility. When the day's labor was done, when the sun had slipped beyond the horizon and the air grew softer, music filled the lives of the ancient Greeks. To them, music was not only entertainment, but a force that shaped the soul. It carried healing qualities, stirred the heart, and soothed the restless mind. In the quiet of the evening, music was one of the most cherished ways to relax. The Greeks believed that music was a gift from the gods, a divine thread woven into the fabric of the universe. Apollo, god of light and harmony, was said to play the kithara, while Orpheus, with his legendary lyre, could charm animals, trees, and even stones with his melodies. Myths reminded people that sound itself was sacred, and to listen to music was to come closer to the divine order of the world. It was no wonder, then, that music held such power over their daily lives. In the courtyards of Athens, small gatherings often began with the plucking of a lyre. Its strings, stretched over a tortoise shell, or crafted from polished wood, produced a sound both delicate and resonant. A host might strum gentle notes while guests reclined on couches, sipping diluted wine and letting conversation drift. These moments were unhurried. Music filled the pauses, softening silence and weaving a sense of calm through the air. For many Greeks, the lyre was the instrument most closely associated with education and refinement. Young men were taught to play it not merely for skill, but for character. It was believed that music shaped one's ethos, that gentle melodies nurtured moderation, while harsher tones might inspire boldness. In this way, music was as much about moral cultivation as it was about relaxation. To play and to listen was to refine the soul. Even beyond the lyre, the Greeks loved the soothing sound of the aulos, a reed instrument whose double pipes created a haunting, breathy harmony. Though sharper in tone, the aulos had its place in both sacred rituals and evenings of leisure. Its sound, carried on the evening breeze, might accompany dancers or lend rhythm to poetry recitations. Together with the lyre, it gave shape to gatherings, creating a shared experience that relaxed the body while engaging the mind. At home, simpler instruments found their way into daily life. Flutes, rattles, and small drums could be played by children and adults alike, filling households with gentle rhythms. These instruments reminded Greeks that music was not reserved for the elite or for festivals. It was a companion to ordinary life, ready to ease the weary heart after a day of work in the fields or at sea. Music was also deeply linked with poetry. Epic verses of Homer, or shorter lyrical pieces by poets like Sappho, were often sung rather than spoken. In the evenings, families or friends might gather to hear stories brought to life through melody. The rise and fall of song gave weight to the words, turning them into something timeless, something that lingered in the heart long after the music faded. In this way, poetry and music together became both memory and relaxation, carrying listeners into a state where imagination softened reality. There was also a therapeutic side to music. Philosophers such as Pythagoras taught that harmony and rhythm could bring balance to the soul. They believed the intervals between notes mirrored the proportions of the cosmos. To listen, therefore, was to align oneself with the natural order of existence. A melody could ease anger, diminish sorrow, or quiet anxiety. For someone restless after the heat of the day, a song played softly in the cool night air was as calming as water flowing in a fountain. Imagine a Greek evening in detail. The sun has long since set, and the stars begin to emerge above whitewashed walls. Oil lamps flicker in courtyards, their golden light warming the stone. A lyre is lifted, and its first notes glide into the darkness, steady and clear. Conversation softens, voices fall, and listeners lean back upon their cushions. The sound fills the spaces between words, gentle and deliberate, as if each note is guiding the mind toward peace. This was relaxation in its purest form, not a distraction from life, but a way of experiencing its harmony. In some settings, music was paired with dance. Slow movements, measured steps, and graceful gestures carried the music into the body. The dances were not hurried. They were deliberate, symbolic, and calming to watch or join. The rhythm of the music mirrored the rhythm of breath, steady and soothing. To move with the melody was to release tension, to let the body follow a natural flow. Music, like bathing, also created bonds among people. Shared songs connected families, neighbors, and friends. Some tunes were old, passed down for generations, carrying with them the weight of memory and tradition. Others were new, improvised in the moment, carrying the freshness of the present. But whether old or new, these songs became threads of connection, binding people together in gentle harmony. For the Greeks, the day was not complete without these moments of sound. Music filled the stillness, offered comfort, and reminded listeners of beauty in its simplest form. The sound of a lyre plucked in the quiet of night, the soft voice of a friend singing, or the sighing breath of an aloes in the distance, all these carried with them a sense of calm. To relax in ancient Greece often meant to listen, to let sound wash over the mind as softly as water over stone. The music of their evenings was not meant to dazzle or overwhelm, but to soothe and restore. It was a reminder that life, like music, was made of rhythm and pause, of harmony and rest. So when we think of their world, we must not only picture the bustling agora or the solemn temples. We must also hear the gentle strings of a lyre drifting across a warm courtyard, lulling those who listened into serenity. That was Greece too, a land where music was medicine, memory, and relaxation, carrying people into sleep as softly as the stars themselves rose above. Among the most celebrated ways that the ancient Greeks found relaxation was through the symposium. The word itself means drinking together, but a symposium was far more than simply sharing wine. It was a ritual of friendship, conversation, and leisure, where men reclined on couches, cups in hand, and allowed the evening to unfold at its own rhythm. These gatherings became the setting for both simple enjoyment and some of the most profound ideas ever spoken. A symposium often began with a sense of ceremony. Guests entered the host's home, removed their sandals, and reclined upon couches arranged around low tables. Servants poured wine, carefully diluted with water in large mixing bowls called craters. The Greeks rarely drank their wine unmixed, believing it too strong and uncivilized. Instead, wine was balanced with water, creating a drink that refreshed without overwhelming. The act of dilution itself was symbolic, a reminder of moderation, of finding balance between pleasure and restraint. As the first cups were poured, the atmosphere shifted into relaxation. Conversation flowed easily, laughter rose, and the concerns of the day were set aside. The air was often scented with burning incense, while lamps flickered against decorated walls. Music drifted in, sometimes from a flute or a lyre, offering a soft backdrop. In these moments, the symposium became a small world unto itself, where time slowed and leisure took center stage. What made the symposium unique was the mixture of pleasure and philosophy. Between songs and stories, serious questions might be raised. What is love? What is justice? What makes a life worth living? Philosophers like Plato later recorded dialogues that unfolded in the setting of symposia, reminding us that relaxation in Greece could include not just the pleasures of the body, but the nourishment of the mind. For the Greeks, to rest was also to think together, to stretch the mind in friendly company. Games were also part of the evening. One favorite was kotabos, in which guests would flick the dregs of their wine at small targets, testing their skill while keeping the mood light. There were riddles, playful challenges, and recitations of poetry. Storytelling was common too, as travelers shared tales of distant lands or retold myths in dramatic fashion. All of these pastimes added texture to the night, balancing thought with play. The symposium was also a place of music and dance. Professional entertainers, known as hetairai, sometimes performed, singing songs or playing instruments. Dancers moved with fluid grace, their bodies echoing the rhythm of flutes. Yet not every gathering was elaborate. Some were modest, consisting only of a few friends, a lyre in the corner, and the quiet murmur of voices. The charm of the symposium lay not in its splendor, but in its mood, a shared space of release, where companionship and conversation eased the mind. Wine itself carried symbolic weight. To drink together was to bond, to blur the edges between self and other. Toasts were made to the gods, especially Dionysus, patron of wine and revelry. Cups were raised in gratitude and in joy, and each sip became part of a shared rhythm. Too much wine could ruin the balance, but in moderation it softened the heart and opened the way for honest words and gentle laughter. Symposia also reflected the Greek love of beauty. The vessels themselves, craters, cups, and pitchers were often decorated with painted scenes of gods, heroes, or daily life. As guests reached for their cups, they admired the artistry, tracing figures with their eyes while sipping. Beauty surrounded them, in sound, in sight, in taste, and in thought. Leisure, to the Greeks, was always about more than one sense. It was a harmony of many. Evenings often stretched deep into the night. Conversations wandered from the profound to the playful, from reflections on the cosmos to teasing jokes among friends. The flicker of lamps dimmed as oil burned low, yet voices lingered. Reclining together, guests felt a rare closeness, a gentle intimacy born of shared time. When the gathering finally ended, each guest carried away not just the memory of wine, but the warmth of connection. For many, the symposium was one of the highest forms of relaxation, because it wove together so many threads of Greek life friendship, philosophy, art, music, and moderation. It was a reminder that leisure was not isolation, but communion, not silence, but the gentle exchange of minds and hearts. When we picture a symposium today, we might imagine philosophers in earnest debate, but it is equally important to imagine the softer details. The sound of diluted wine being poured into clay cups, the hum of voices rising and falling, the soft notes of a lyre in the background. The Greeks found rest not in withdrawal, but in gathering, in the comfort of shared space, where wine loosened the spirit and words flowed like water. So when we think of relaxation in ancient Greece, we must remember these evenings of reclining couches and glowing lamps, where friends gathered not only to drink, but to savor life itself. The symposium was leisure at its richest, pleasure mingled with thought, laughter mingled with wisdom, and companionship that lingered long after the night was done. When we think of relaxation today, we might picture soft cushions, quiet music, or a warm bath. But for the Greeks, one of the most important forms of leisure was found not in stillness, but in movement. The gymnasia, those open spaces dedicated to physical training and philosophy, were central to Greek life, and they offered a kind of relaxation that united the body and the mind. To us, exercise may sound like effort rather than ease. Yet for the Greeks, it was a pathway into balance, harmony, and release. The word gymnasium itself comes from the Greek word gymnos, meaning naked, for it was here that men trained unclothed, free of restraint, their bodies moving naturally beneath the sun. The gymnasia were not merely places of training for athletes. They were gathering grounds where citizens of the city came to strengthen themselves, converse with friends, and cultivate both vigor and wisdom. To walk into one was to step into an atmosphere of energy softened by companionship, where exertion gave way to relaxation through rhythm and ritual. A typical day at the gymnasium began in the early morning, when the air was still cool, and the marble stones held a faint trace of the night's chill. Citizens stretched their limbs, rubbed themselves with oil to protect the skin, and prepared for exercise. Wrestling matches, running, discus throwing, and other activities filled the grounds. Yet these were not frantic contests. They were measured, deliberate, guided by rules and traditions. The rhythm of the body in motion, the breath steadying, the heart quickening, this too was a form of release. After exertion, the gymnasium became a place of restoration. Men scraped their skin clean with strigils, removing oil, dust, and sweat before bathing in cool basins. Conversation filled the air as friends compared their exercises, laughed at small stumbles, or praised each other's strength. The atmosphere was less about competition than about camaraderie, where physical effort blended with social ease. To be among friends in the gymnasium was as much about pleasure as it was about training. What made these places unique was the way they joined physical and intellectual life. Gymnasia often had shaded colonnades where philosophers taught, poets recited, and students listened. After running or wrestling, one might sit beneath the columns, cooling in the shade, and engage in thoughtful dialogue. This mingling of effort and reflection created a harmony that the Greeks prized. They believed that a strong body supported a strong mind, and that together they created a balanced spirit. Leisure, then, was found not only in rest, but in the uniting of action and contemplation. The gymnasium was also a place of beauty. Marble statues and carefully tended grounds created an atmosphere that pleased the senses. Olive trees offered shade, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The smell of oil and earth mingled with the sound of sandals on stone. It was a place where the human form in motion was celebrated as something graceful and natural, not only in contests, but in the simple movements of exercise itself. For the young, gymnasia were schools of character. Discipline was taught alongside strength. Respect for others, moderation in effort, and a sense of harmony were all instilled within these walls. Older citizens came not only to exercise, but to watch, to advise, and to share wisdom. In this way, generations mingled, and the gymnasium became not just a space of training, but of community, where leisure meant belonging as much as exertion. Even those not engaged in strenuous exercise could find relaxation there. Some sat in the colonnades, watching the athletes while engaging in light conversation. Others strolled slowly through the grounds, enjoying the ordered beauty of the place. The gymnasium, unlike a battlefield or marketplace, carried little of the noise and pressure of daily toil. It was a space devoted to the cultivation of health and thought, and in that, it was restful in its own unique way. For the Greeks, the gymnasium was an answer to the question of how one might live fully. To neglect the body was to weaken the mind, but to overindulge in the body without thought was equally unbalanced. True leisure was found in the middle path, where exercise restored energy and conversation nourished wisdom. Here, sweat and effort became preludes to calm, and rest followed naturally, earned through graceful exertion. If we imagine the scene closely, we can see how relaxation unfolded there. The sun high above, the sound of laughter from a wrestling match, the steady rhythm of feet striking the ground as men ran laps. Then, after effort, the pouring of cool water, the scraping of oil, the sighs of relief as tired muscles eased. Beneath the shade, words of philosophy floated gently, ideas exchanged as freely as breath. In this atmosphere, both body and mind came to rest. So when we think of leisure in ancient Greece, let us remember that it was not always stillness. Sometimes relaxation came through motion, through the harmony of body and spirit joined in balance. The gymnasia offered just such a space, where exercise was not a burden, but a pleasure, not only preparation for contests, but a way of being at peace with oneself and with others. In their rhythm, their beauty, and their blending of activity with thought, they gave the Greeks one of their most cherished forms of relaxation. To step into a Greek garden was to step into a world where time slowed, where the natural world whispered its secrets in shade and fragrance. For the people of ancient Greece, gardens and outdoor retreats were not just spaces of beauty. They were sanctuaries of calm. In a land of sun, stone, and sea, the cultivated garden offered both order and serenity, a place where the senses could soften and the mind could wander freely. Greek gardens were not vast in the way later Roman villas would display them, but they carried an intimacy that made them deeply personal. Within city walls, small courtyards often bloomed with plants in clay pots, fig trees, vines, herbs, and flowers whose scents rose gently into the air. Olive trees, sacred to Athena, stood with their silver-green leaves shimmering in the sunlight, casting delicate shadows across the ground. To sit beneath such a tree, listening to the rustle of leaves and the hum of cicadas, was itself a form of relaxation. For the wealthy, gardens could be more elaborate, with pathways winding between shaded areas, small fountains trickling cool water, and beds of flowers carefully tended. These retreats were designed not merely to impress, but to soothe. A guest walking through such a space might feel the stress of the bustling marketplace fade away as they breathed in the aromas of rosemary, thyme, and blooming myrtle. In the evening, when the air cooled, torches and oil lamps lit the pathways, creating an atmosphere of quiet enchantment. Yet even the simplest outdoor spaces offered peace. Farmers, after a long day in the fields, might pause beneath a fruit tree before heading home, taking comfort in the cool earth beneath their feet. Shepherds found rest on the hillsides, gazing across valleys as their flocks settled for the night. The natural world itself was a vast garden, and to the Greeks it was always a source of renewal. Philosophers often used gardens and groves as places for reflection and teaching. Plato's Academy, located in a grove of olive trees just outside Athens, became a symbol of learning and leisure combined. Students and teachers walked shaded paths, discussing matters of virtue, knowledge, and the soul. The act of walking among trees, of breathing open air while turning over ideas, brought a rhythm that encouraged thought while easing the body. To learn in a garden was not strain but pleasure, a union of relaxation and philosophy. Religious associations deepened the tranquility of outdoor retreats. Certain groves were considered sacred to the gods, and within them silence and reverence mingled with rest. Pilgrims came not only to offer prayers, but also to sit in the presence of nature as calm. Springs, caves, and shaded hillsides often became places where mortals felt closest to the divine, where the weight of daily life could be set down for a time. The sensory experience of these outdoor retreats was rich and layered. The sound of water trickling from a fountain or a spring echoed softly against stone walls. The smell of herbs, warmed by the sun, drifted on the breeze. Bees hummed among blossoms, their steady rhythm a lullaby of the natural world. Light filtered through leaves, creating shifting patterns that danced across the ground. All of these small details invited the mind to settle, to let thoughts flow gently, like the water that nourished the plants. Even feasting sometimes took place in gardens. Instead of crowded banquet halls, hosts might spread couches in shaded courtyards, where guests reclined among flowers and vines. The mix of food, laughter, music, and the scent of blooming plants created a setting where leisure became layered, each sense drawn into harmony. To eat grapes beneath the very vine that bore them, to sip wine while shaded by olive branches, was to live in simple abundance. The Greeks also valued the healing quality of gardens. Physicians such as Hippocrates taught that herbs grown in these spaces were not only useful for medicine, but could restore the spirit by their presence alone. To walk among fragrant plants, to touch their leaves and breathe their perfume, was believed to strengthen health. Gardens were places where the boundary between physical and emotional well-being blurred, where rest and healing grew side by side. Imagine for a moment sitting in one of these gardens at dusk. The day has grown quiet, and the sky is painted with soft shades of pink and gold. The air is cooling. The perfume of flowers is stronger now, and a breeze stirs the leaves overhead. A small fountain trickles steadily, its sound mingling with the distant notes of a lyre drifting from a nearby home. You lean back, the stone bench cool beneath you, and you feel the world slowing, your thoughts unwinding with the rhythm of nature. That was the gift of Greek gardens, the transformation of ordinary time into timeless peace. Gardens and outdoor retreats show us that for the Greeks, relaxation was often a return to nature. Whether in a grand courtyard filled with flowers or beneath a single tree in a quiet field, they understood that the earth itself offered calm. To step into a garden was to step away from the noise of the city, the labor of the day, and even the weight of thought. It was to enter a space where beauty and tranquility joined hands, where the soul could rest as easily as the body. When the Greeks sought leisure, they did not always retreat into solitude. At times, they gathered in vast numbers, filling stone amphitheaters carved into hillsides, to watch the stories of gods and heroes brought to life upon the stage. Theater in ancient Greece was not only a cultural institution, it was also a form of communal relaxation, where people shared in laughter, tears, and reflection. To sit among thousands, listening to actors' voices echo against the sky, was to experience leisure in a deeply collective way. The theater was sacred to Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and transformation, and performances were often part of festivals held in his honor. These festivals, such as the Great Dionysia in Athens, were times of release, when work paused and the community came together in celebration. The anticipation of a performance was itself a kind of joy. Citizens dressed in their best, families and friends gathered, and as the sun rose or set above the stone seating, the audience prepared to let the world of drama carry them away. The design of the theaters themselves encouraged a sense of awe and calm. Carved into natural hillsides, their sweeping tiers of stone seats opened toward a stage backed by sky and landscape. The air was open and fresh, the sounds of voices carried with clarity, and the vast space created a sense of grandeur. To sit in such a place was to be reminded of the harmony between human art and the natural world. The plays performed ranged from solemn tragedies to playful comedies. In tragedies, stories of heroes and gods unfolded with weight and dignity. The struggles of Oedipus, the sorrows of Medea, or the defiance of Antigone were presented not only as entertainment, but as reflection. To watch these figures grapple with fate was to engage in a shared meditation on life as struggles. Even in sadness there was release, a catharsis that left audiences calmer, as though a burden had been lifted from their hearts. Comedies offered a different kind of relaxation. Playwrights such as Aristophanes filled the stage with satire, wit, and playful absurdities. The laughter that rippled through the audience, from the highest rows to the lowest, was a unifying force. To laugh together was to forget cares, to dissolve tension, and to remember joy. The humor could be sharp, even biting, but it was always part of the greater purpose of leisure, to free the mind, to lighten the spirit, and to leave behind the heaviness of daily life. The performances themselves were rich in sound and spectacle. Choruses of singers and dancers filled the stage, their movements and voices blending into rhythm. Masks, painted with expressions of sorrow, joy, or mischief, amplified the emotions of the actors and allowed even those seated far away to feel the drama. Music accompanied the action, its notes guiding the audience's feelings like a gentle undercurrent. All of these elements worked together to create an atmosphere where people could lose themselves in the story, forgetting their own worries for a time. What made theater so powerful as a form of relaxation was its communal nature. Alone, one might reflect on sorrow or find joy in laughter. But in the theater, these experiences were magnified by being shared. The sighs of sympathy, the bursts of laughter, the quiet silences as the stage grew tense, all of these bound the audience together. In that unity, there was comfort, a reminder that no one carried life's burdens entirely alone. For many Greeks, attending the theater was more than leisure, it was a civic duty, a celebration of culture that defined their identity. Yet this civic spirit did not diminish its restful qualities. To set aside work and gather in beauty, to listen, to watch, and to feel together was to find peace through community. The theater gave both escape and reflection, offering the chance to look at the world through stories, while being lifted out of the weight of one's own troubles. Imagine sitting in the amphitheater at dawn, the first light spilling over the Acropolis as the performance begins. The air is cool, filled with the sound of voices rising in chorus. Thousands sit around you, all eyes fixed on the stage, their attention united with yours. Hours pass as stories unfold, and when you rise to leave, you feel lighter, as though the music and the drama have carried away some of your weariness. That was the gift of Greek theater art as rest, spectacle as solace. Theatrical performances remind us that relaxation does not always mean silence or solitude. Sometimes it is found in the shared breath of a crowd, in the laughter that rolls across stone seats, in the hush that falls as tragedy takes its turn. The Greeks knew that leisure could be communal, that to rest together was to strengthen bonds and to ease the soul. In their theaters, leisure became a spectacle of harmony, where art and life intertwined, and where thousands of hearts beat in rhythm with the story. For the ancient Greeks, leisure was not only found in gardens, theaters, or homes, but also in moments of sacred celebration. Religious festivals, scattered throughout the year, offered occasions when work paused, burdens were set aside, and entire communities came together in joy and reverence. These festivals were not merely duties of worship, they were spaces of rest, of release, and of connection, where devotion blended seamlessly with celebration. Each festival was tied to a god or goddess, and through these occasions, the Greeks honored their deities while also nourishing their own spirits. The most famous, perhaps, were the grand festivals of Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, where theater, song, and processions filled the streets. At these times, the city seemed transformed. Market stalls closed, civic matters were set aside, and citizens gathered in processions that wound through the city with music, flowers, and offerings. The sense of shared purpose, of being part of something greater, was itself deeply soothing. The festivals of Demeter and Persephone, linked to the cycles of harvest and renewal, carried their own kind of comfort. As the fields ripened, people honored the goddess of grain, giving thanks for food and abundance. The Eleusinian mysteries, celebrated in Demeter's honor, held rituals of deep spiritual meaning. Participants, after days of preparation, walked in solemn procession and entered sacred spaces where secrets of life and death were symbolically revealed. For those who took part, the mysteries were not only religious duties, but profound experiences of peace, reminding them of life cycles and easing the fear of mortality. Other festivals, such as those for Athena in Athens, turned the city into a stage of devotion. The Panathenaic festival honored the goddess with processions, athletic contests, music, and sacrifices. Citizens filled the streets, and the great Parthenon received its offerings. Though these events carried grandeur, they were also times when people left behind their daily concerns. To participate was to rest within tradition, to lose oneself in the rhythm of ritual, and to feel carried by the collective spirit of the city. For many, festivals were also opportunities to enjoy simple pleasures. Food and drink flowed freely, music and dancing filled the nights, and laughter echoed beneath the open sky. Children played in the crowds, families reunited, and strangers became companions, sharing wine and stories. In these moments, the line between worship and joy blurred. To honor the gods was to celebrate life, and to celebrate life was to relax the body and heart. The sensory richness of these festivals deepened their restorative power. Imagine garlands of flowers adorning temples, their fragrance mingling with the smoke of incense rising into the air. Imagine the sound of drums and flutes guiding processions through city streets, the steady beat of feet on stone, the swell of voices lifted in hymns. The sight of colorful robes, of flickering torches carried into the night, of tables laden with food, all of these details turned festivals into experiences of beauty as well as devotion. To be immersed in them was to be transported, carried away from ordinary time into sacred time. Spiritual rest was at the heart of these gatherings. The Greeks believed that honoring the gods brought harmony, not only to the city, but to the soul. In celebrating together, individuals felt a release from worry, as if the protection of the gods gave them permission to let go. The collective joy of the festival became a kind of healing, where sorrow and toil melted into song and dance. Even for those who could not join the grand festivals of Athens or Eleusis, smaller village celebrations carried the same power. Local shrines honored their patron deities with processions, sacrifices, and feasts. Neighbors gathered in fields or by temples, sharing food and drink beneath the stars. These simpler gatherings held an intimacy that was as restful as the grandest ceremonies. To sit with one's community, to sing, to laugh, and to honor the divine together, this too was leisure in its purest sense. At their heart, Greek festivals remind us that rest is not always private. Sometimes it is found in the embrace of community, in the rhythm of shared ritual, in the joy of dancing together beneath the open sky. The Greeks understood that the soul found peace not only in solitude, but also in belonging, in the warmth of togetherness. Religious festivals offered this gift, a pause in the cycle of work, a chance to breathe in beauty, and a moment to rest in the presence of the gods. So when we think of how the Greeks relaxed, we must imagine not only gardens, baths, and symposia, but also these sacred days when the city itself seemed to exhale, when voices rose in harmony, and when people found rest in worship, laughter, and song. Festivals were more than celebrations. They were sanctuaries of the spirit, where leisure became sacred and sacredness became leisure. Relaxation in ancient Greece was not always found in the grandeur of festivals, theaters, or gymnasia. Sometimes it was discovered in the quiet intimacy of home, in the simple comforts that surrounded daily life. Within the walls of Greek households, people found small rituals that soothed their bodies, softened their spirits, and gave rhythm to the spaces between labor and sleep. Reclining on couches, anointing the skin with perfumes and oils, and savoring the gentle pace of evening became some of the most cherished forms of rest. Greek homes were often built around a central courtyard, open to the sky, where breezes moved freely and light spilled gently through the day. In these spaces, families gathered to dine, converse, and relax. The act of reclining while eating was not merely a physical position. It was a declaration that the day's work had ended and leisure had begun. Men lay on low couches called klini, propped on one elbow, with food and drink set upon low tables within reach. The position itself encouraged unhurried dining, where conversation mingled with the flavors of bread, olives, figs, and wine. Reclining allowed the body to soften into rest, creating a rhythm of stillness that echoed the larger Greek devotion to balance. The use of perfumes and oils deepened this sense of comfort. Olive oil, abundant in Greece, was not only food, but a tool of relaxation. Massaged into the skin, it softened and warmed the body after bathing or exercise. It could be infused with herbs like mint, thyme, or sage, adding fragrance that lingered softly in the air. Wealthier households had access to exotic perfumes, imported from the East, their scents rich with spices and flowers. To anoint oneself with oil was both practical and pleasurable, a ritual that refreshed the body while surrounding it with fragrance. The application of oil was often paired with massage, a practice known for its calming qualities. Family members or servants might rub oil into tired muscles, easing away the strain of labor or travel. The rhythm of touch, combined with the soothing texture of oil, brought comfort that was physical, yet deeply emotional as well. For the Greeks, this small act of care was not only restorative, but also symbolic, a reminder that the body deserved honor and attention. Perfumes carried meanings beyond their fragrance. They were linked to love, beauty, and even the divine. Women might dab floral oils upon their hair and clothes, while men used more earthy scents after exercise. In gatherings, the subtle fragrances mingled, creating an atmosphere of refinement and delight. The very air of the home became part of relaxation, enriched by these aromas that signaled abundance, pleasure, and peace. Evening routines often unfolded slowly in these domestic spaces. After meals, conversation drifted easily, sometimes with music or poetry to accompany the mood. Lamps glowed softly, their light flickering across walls painted with simple patterns. In summer, Open courtyards allowed the night sky to shine overhead, the stars themselves becoming part of the household's beauty. In winter, hearths glowed with warmth, their steady flames offering comfort against the chill. These scenes of intimacy were where relaxation most often took its deepest root, not in the noise of the city, but in the gentle stillness of home. For children, relaxation came in simpler forms. They played with small toys carved from wood or clay, listened to stories told by parents or grandparents, and eventually curled up upon simple bedding as the house grew quiet. For women, leisure might be found in weaving or embroidery, work that, while productive, also carried a soothing rhythm, the steady passing of thread through loom or needle through cloth. For men, the act of reclining and conversing with friends within the household was often the most valued form of private leisure. Household relaxation was not limited to the wealthy. Even modest homes had their rituals. A simple jug of oil, a clay lamp, a loaf of bread shared among family, these too created an atmosphere of comfort. Though perfumes imported from afar might be out of reach, the scent of herbs hung from doorways or rubbed into oil was within everyone's grasp. The smallest of gestures, like reclining after a day's work or resting beneath the stars in a courtyard, gave ordinary Greeks the same sense of ease as their wealthier counterparts. Religion also touched domestic leisure. Small household shrines, dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, or other protective spirits, reminded families that their home itself was sacred. Lighting incense or offering a portion of food to the household gods brought reassurance, a spiritual comfort that accompanied physical relaxation. In these moments, the home became not only a refuge from the outside world, but a sanctuary blessed by divine presence. Imagine such a scene at the end of a long day, a family reclining together in a courtyard, the father sipping diluted wine, the mother weaving by lamplight, children whispering stories before drifting into sleep. The scent of olive oil, warmed by the skin, mingles with the faint smoke of the hearth. The cicadas outside are quieting, and the night air carries a softness that cools the stones. There is no rush, no urgency, only the slow unfolding of evening. This was relaxation in its most intimate form, quiet, steady, and filled with gentle comfort. Household comforts remind us that for the Greeks, relaxation was not always about spectacle or community. It was also about the simple rhythms of daily life, the embrace of family, the care of the body, and the beauty of the senses. Reclining on couches, perfuming the air with oils, listening to soft music or quiet voices, these small rituals created spaces of peace that were as vital as any festival or theater. In the home, the Greeks found not only shelter but serenity, and in their nightly routines, they discovered the timeless art of rest. Leisure in ancient Greece was not always found in the grandeur of theaters, festivals, or symposia. Sometimes it lived in the simplest of pastimes, in small games played at home, in courtyards, or in shaded corners of the marketplace. These moments of play, though modest, carried with them the joy of companionship and the pleasure of letting time slip gently by. Board games, dice, and other diversions gave the Greeks opportunities to relax in ways that required little effort yet brought much delight. Among the most common games was pessoi, played with small stones or counters upon a board scratched into the ground or carved from wood. The exact rules of the game remain a mystery to us, but depictions on pottery show men bent over their boards, deeply engaged, moving pieces with care. The rhythm of the game, the focus of the players, and the gentle tension of competition all made it a soothing pastime. To watch counters slide across the surface, to consider each move, was to enter a quiet world of strategy and patience, where the cares of the day faded into the simplicity of play. Another favored pastime was knucklebones, or astragaloi, played with the ankle bones of sheep or goats, later replaced by carved pieces of bone or ivory. This game resembled a mix of dice and jacks, with players tossing the bones into the air, and catching them in various ways. Children delighted in its unpredictability, laughing as pieces scattered across the floor, while adults found in it a small escape from their routines. The clatter of the bones, the cheerful arguments over points, and the playful spirit of the game filled homes and marketplaces with an energy that was light and refreshing. Dice games were also popular, though they carried both pleasure and risk. For some, tossing dice was an innocent diversion, a way to pass the time in friendly company. For others, gambling gave the game a sharper edge, as coins changed hands and fortunes shifted on the fall of a cube. Yet even here, the heart of the pastime was not only in gain or loss, but in the suspense and laughter shared among friends. The roll of the dice, the pause as eyes followed its tumble, created moments of thrill that could quickly dissolve into jokes, stories, and easy laughter. Beyond boards and dice, simple physical pastimes carried their own sense of ease. Children played chasing games in narrow streets, their laughter echoing between stone walls. Adults might engage in friendly competitions with hoops, sticks, or balls, games that required little equipment yet filled the air with joy. The simplicity of these diversions was part of their charm. They required no elaborate setting, only companionship and a willingness to play. Even storytelling itself became a kind of game. Riddles were exchanged, puzzles posed, and challenges set between friends to test wit and imagination. The laughter that followed a clever answer, or the groan that accompanied a difficult riddle solved too late, became part of the rhythm of leisure. These verbal games, light and playful, carried the same spirit as physical ones, offering rest through the delight of imagination and shared amusement. What is striking about these simple pastimes is how much they reveal of Greek values. Even in play, the Greeks loved balance between skill and chance, between thought and laughter. Games were not idle wastes of time. They were small exercises in patience, strategy, and companionship. In the measured movements of pessoi, in the toss of knucklebones, in the shared riddles of friends, there was always a sense of moderation, of play, woven into life without overwhelming it. These diversions also remind us that relaxation did not always require grandeur. A quiet afternoon in a shaded courtyard, with a board scratched into stone and a handful of counters, could bring as much peace as a festival. A group of children tossing knucklebones into the air could create as much joy as a chorus in the theater. For the Greeks, leisure could be found in the simplest of gestures, in moments that asked little but gave much. Imagine the scene: two friends reclining after a meal, a small board placed between them. They take turns moving counters, voices low and easy, the evening air soft against their skin. A child nearby tosses knucklebones, catching them with laughter, while a third friend offers a riddle that sparks playful debate. The flicker of a lamp glows against the stone walls, and the quiet of night settles gently around them. In these moments, leisure becomes timeless, unremarkable in grandeur, yet profound in its simplicity. Board games and simple pastimes show us that the Greeks understood rest in many forms. Sometimes it was grand and communal, other times it was intimate and playful. To relax did not always mean to be still or silent. It could mean to play, to laugh, to puzzle over a riddle, or to watch dice tumble across a board. These small joys carried them through their days and gave shape to their nights, weaving leisure into the very fabric of ordinary life. As the sun slipped below the horizon and the day's work gave way to quiet, many Greeks turned to words for their evening leisure. Poetry and storytelling were not simply forms of entertainment, but rituals that carried comfort, beauty, and reflection. In these moments, gathered by lamplight or beneath the open sky, people allowed language to soften the edges of life, to stir imagination, and to soothe restless minds. The Greeks believed in the power of words. Long before written texts became common, stories were carried by voice, passed from one generation to another. The epics of Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey or sung by bards who traveled from town to town, their voices shaping the rhythm of memory. To listen to such stories in the evening was to feel part of something vast and enduring. The rise and fall of verse, accompanied sometimes by the gentle strum of a lyre, lulled listeners into a trance where time seemed to dissolve. For the Greeks, poetry was both entertainment and rest, a weaving of language that calmed the heart as it stirred the imagination. In households, smaller gatherings carried the same magic. Families and friends reclined together, lamps casting flickering shadows, as one person recited a poem or told a tale. Some stories carried laughter, filled with wit and playful characters. Others carried sorrow, reminding listeners of the fragility of life. Yet all shared a rhythm that drew people closer to one another and to themselves. The sound of a familiar voice telling a familiar story was itself a comfort, as steady as the glow of the hearth. The power of storytelling also lay in its ability to transport. A farmer might, for a time, forget the weight of his fields as he listened to tales of Odysseus sailing over wide seas. A child, weary from play, might drift into dreams while hearing of gods and heroes whose deeds carried wonder. Even adults found solace in these narratives, for they reminded them that life was not only toil but also beauty, imagination, and mystery. Poetry was not only about grand epics. Lyrical poems, such as those of Sappho, captured the quiet intensity of love, longing, and nature. To hear her verses recited was to enter a more intimate space of reflection, where simple words carried deep emotion. These shorter pieces were often sung with music, their gentle rhythms flowing like a lullaby. In their softness, listeners found calm, a rest that lingered long after the song had ended. The rhythm of poetry itself mirrored the rhythm of relaxation. Meter and cadence gave structure to the words, like the steady beat of footsteps or the rise and fall of breath. Listeners followed the flow, carried along without effort. Even when the themes were serious, the act of listening brought a peace of its own, for the mind could surrender to the sound. The Greeks understood that beauty did not only rest in meaning, but also in form, in the music of language itself. Even riddles and shorter tales held their place in evening leisure. Friends exchanged clever puzzles, challenging one another's wit, while laughter rose when an answer surprised them. Children delighted in fables, especially those of Aesop, where animals spoke with human voices, teaching simple lessons in a way that was light and memorable. These smaller stories, woven into daily life, carried both amusement and instruction, but above all, they carried ease. Imagine a Greek evening in detail. The courtyard is quiet, the air cooled after the heat of the day. Lamps glow gently, their flames flickering against whitewashed walls. A lyre rests nearby, its strings waiting to join in song. Friends recline on couches, cups of wine within reach, while one among them begins to recite. The words flow steadily, measured and clear. Some listeners close their eyes, letting the rhythm wash over them. Others smile, leaning into the story. Children nestle close to their parents, eyes heavy with sleep. In this scene, relaxation comes not from silence, but from the sound of words that carry both memory and imagination. Poetry and storytelling gave the Greeks a way to step outside the demands of daily life and into a shared world of beauty. It was a form of leisure that required little, only a voice, an ear, and a moment of time. Yet within its simplicity lay depth, the soothing of sorrow, the joy of laughter, the wonder of imagination. For the Greeks, to listen to a story was to rest in tradition, to belong to a community of memory, and to be carried into peace. So when we think of Greek leisure, let us not forget these evenings of poetry and tale. They remind us that relaxation is not always about the body, but often about the mind and heart. In the measured lines of verse, in the cadence of stories told by firelight, the Greeks found a calm that was timeless, a gentle rest that still speaks to us across the centuries. The sea was the heartbeat of ancient Greece. It touched every aspect of life, shaping trade, travel, and myth. But beyond its practical roles, the sea also offered a place of rest. The shores of the Aegean, with their soft waves and endless horizons, became sanctuaries where Greeks found relaxation and renewal. To stand upon the sand, to listen to the tide, or to sail gently across the water, was to enter into a rhythm older than time itself, a rhythm that soothed the body and calmed the mind. The Greeks lived in a land of peninsulas and islands, where the sea was never far away. For many, it was a daily presence, its salt carried in the breeze, its vastness visible from hills and cliffs. Fishermen and sailors knew it as both friend and challenge, but they also knew its gentler moods. At dawn, when the water shimmered in pale light, or at dusk, when the waves caught the glow of the setting sun, the sea revealed its softer side. These were times when people lingered on the shore, resting from labor, watching the horizon as though it held answers beyond words. To walk along the beach was to walk in harmony with nature. The sand cooled beneath bare feet, shells and stones scattered like quiet offerings from the waves. Children played at the edge of the surf, their laughter mingling with the cries of gulls overhead. Adults reclined upon rocks or soft sand, letting the wind wash away the heat of the day. The sea's constant motion became a lullaby, a reminder that life itself moved in tide's ebb and flow, work and rest. Sailing also carried its own form of leisure. Not every voyage was one of trade or war. Some journeys were small excursions, short trips along the coast or to nearby islands. To drift upon calm waters, sails filled with gentle wind, was to experience freedom and peace. The rocking of the boat, the creak of wood, the splash of water against the hull created a rhythm that invited relaxation. On such journeys, conversation slowed, thoughts wandered, and the mind found quiet in the endless expanse of sea and sky. The seaside also carried associations of health and healing. Springs and waters near the shore were sometimes considered sacred, linked to gods who protected sailors and travelers. To bathe in the sea, to let the salt cleanse the skin, was believed to carry benefits beyond the physical. It refreshed the body, revived the spirit, and left one feeling lighter, as though some burden had been washed away with the tide. Myth deepened the sea's sense of wonder. The Greeks told stories of Poseidon, ruler of the oceans, and of Nereus and his daughters, the Nereids, who danced in the waves. These tales reminded listeners that the sea was alive with presence, that beneath its surface dwelled powers both fearsome and benevolent. To sit by the shore, listening to the surf, was to sit in the presence of the divine, a form of leisure that touched not only the senses, but also the spirit. Even festivals and rituals sometimes turned toward the water. Offerings were cast into the sea in gratitude or supplication, while processions led to coastal temples where prayers were lifted against the backdrop of the waves. These ceremonies carried a serenity born of the sea's vastness, reminding participants that they were part of a greater world, one that stretched far beyond the reach of their own shores. For ordinary people, seaside leisure was often simple. A fisherman might pause after hauling in his nets, gazing at the horizon as the sun rose. A farmer might walk to the shore after a day in the fields, letting the sound of the surf ease his mind. Families might gather on the beach at evening, eating simple meals together while the stars began to shine above the darkened water. In these small gestures, the sea gave rest as surely as any garden or theater. Imagine for a moment reclining upon a stone ledge by the Aegean. The waves lap steadily below, their rhythm unbroken. The air is cool, touched with salt. The horizon stretches endlessly, a band of deep blue meeting the fading light of sky. Around you, friends are quiet, each lost in thought, yet all joined in the same gentle peace. The sea has taken the noise of the world and replaced it with calm. In that moment, leisure is not an escape from life, but a deeper immersion in its rhythm. The Greeks, surrounded by the waters of the Aegean, knew that the sea was both teacher and companion. It taught them patience, humility, and wonder. It gave them food, trade, and stories, but it also gave them rest. To listen to its waves, to walk upon its shores, or to sail upon its calm surface was to find peace in motion, a reminder that all of life is carried by tides. For them, the sea was more than geography. It was a place of renewal, where relaxation flowed as naturally as water itself. Among the many ways the ancient Greeks sought rest, few were as profound as their visits to healing sanctuaries. These sacred places, known as Asclepia, were dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine and healing. Scattered across the Greek world, they were not only centers of treatment, but sanctuaries of calm, where the weary body and the troubled mind could find relief. To step into an Asclepian was to step into a space where divine care and human need met in quiet harmony. The most famous of these sanctuaries was at Epidaurus, nestled among hills and groves, where pilgrims arrived from far and wide. The journey itself was often part of the healing, for the path to the sanctuary carried people away from the noise of city life into landscapes of peace. Olive trees lined the roads, breezes stirred the air, and anticipation softened the steps of those who sought comfort. By the time they reached the sacred grounds, many already felt lighter, as though the sanctuary's calm had begun before they even arrived. Within the sanctuary, rituals blended with rest. Pilgrims offered sacrifices at the altar, prayed for healing, and then entered the abaton, a quiet hall where they prepared to sleep. This sleep, known as incubation, was central to the experience. It was believed that Asclepius would appear in dreams, offering cures or guidance. To lie down upon the sanctuary floor, surrounded by silence, was to surrender one's worries into the care of the divine. As stillness itself was healing, a chance to let go of fear and to rest in trust. By day, the Asclepian was filled with gentle activity. Priests tended the sick, treatments were offered, and the grounds were alive with the sound of birds and flowing water. Springs and fountains, considered sacred, provided not only refreshment, but also symbolic cleansing. Patients bathed in these waters, washed their wounds, and allowed the coolness to soothe them. Herbs grew nearby, their scents rising in the air, reminders that nature itself was part of the cure. The architecture of these sanctuaries was designed to create peace. Colonnades framed open courtyards, where visitors could walk slowly in the shade. The theaters and gymnasia, often found within larger sanctuaries, offered diversions of art and exercise, reminding patients that healing was not only about the body, but also about the mind and spirit. To listen to music, to watch a performance, or to engage in gentle conversation beneath the columns was as much a part of recovery as any remedy. Animals also played a role in the experience. Dogs sacred to Asclepius roamed the grounds, believed to lick wounds and bring cures. Snakes, too, were sacred to the god, their presence a symbol of renewal and transformation. Though strange to modern eyes, to the Greeks, these creatures embodied the mystery of healing, their quiet movements through the sanctuary reminding visitors of the cycles of life and rebirth. For those who came with heavy hearts or troubled minds, the Asclepian offered more than medical treatment. It was a place where the spirit was calmed by ritual, beauty, and silence. To walk among the groves, to sit beside the fountains, to lie down in the abaton and surrender to dreams, these were acts of deep rest. Whether cures were miraculous or gradual, the experience itself brought a sense of renewal, as though one had been cared for not only by priests, but by the gods themselves. The fame of Epidaurus spread widely, but other Asclepia across Greece and beyond offered similar refuge. From Kos to Pergamon, sanctuaries welcomed the sick, the weary, and the hopeful. Each was shaped by its landscape, yet all shared the same essence, the blending of rest, ritual, and trust. To enter one was to step into a space where time seemed to slow, where healing unfolded as gently as the passing of clouds across the sky. Imagine lying upon a simple mat in the Abaddon at night. The air is cool, carrying the scent of herbs. Outside, the sounds of water trickle softly, mingling with the quiet movements of sacred animals. Around you, others breathe steadily in sleep, each waiting for a dream of healing. You close your eyes, surrendering to rest, and in that moment, whether visited by vision or by silence, you feel comfort. The worries of illness loosen their hold, and you drift into a sleep that carries both hope and peace. The Asclepian experience reminds us that relaxation is not always about amusement or diversion. Sometimes it is about surrender, about allowing oneself to rest fully, to trust in care greater than one's own. For the Greeks, healing sanctuaries embodied this truth. They were places where the weary could find not only medicine, but also tranquility, where the act of seeking health became itself a form of leisure for the spirit. In these sacred spaces, the Greeks discovered that rest was the first step toward renewal, and that to lie quietly, embraced by beauty and silence, was to begin the journey back to wholeness. In the heart of every Greek city stood the agora, the bustling marketplace where daily life unfolded. To modern eyes, it might seem a place of business and trade rather than rest. Yet for the Greeks, the agora was also a center of leisure. It was a place where citizens gathered not only to buy and sell, but to talk, to watch, and to enjoy the rhythm of communal life. To stroll through the marketplace was to take part in the pulse of the city, a leisurely act that connected people with one another and with the world around them. The agora was open and spacious, often surrounded by colonnades that offered shade. Stalls and tables displayed goods of every kind: pottery, textiles, spices, and simple foods. Merchants called out to customers, bargaining filled the air, and the scent of bread or roasted meat drifted on the breeze. Yet amid this activity, the pace could be surprisingly unhurried. Many citizens came not to buy anything at all, but simply to be present, to walk slowly through the stalls, greeting friends and acquaintances, watching performances, or listening to conversations. For men of leisure, the agora was a stage upon which social life unfolded. Politicians gave speeches, philosophers debated, and storytellers entertained. A citizen could spend hours drifting from one group to another, listening to the hum of ideas as much as the hum of commerce. To pause in the shade of a column, cup of wine in hand, while others spoke passionately of matters great and small, was a kind of leisure that blended observation with companionship. The marketplace was not only about what one bought, but about the experience of being part of a living crowd. Children, too, found joy in the agora. They played between the columns, chased each other across the open spaces, and watched with wonder as performers drew laughter or applause. For them, the marketplace was a place of color and sound, a space where leisure meant play, discovery, and excitement. Women, who in some city-states had more restricted roles, still found the agora an important place for gathering, whether to purchase goods for the household or to exchange news with friends. Even simple errands carried with them the possibility of social connection. The sensory richness of the agora added to its leisurely character. The voices of vendors rose in steady rhythm, punctuated by the clatter of pottery or the bray of animals being sold. Musicians sometimes played in the open air, their flutes and lyres turning commerce into performance. The smells of food stalls, warm bread, honey cakes, roasted fish tempted passers-by. Colors of dyed cloth and painted pottery caught the eye. All of this together created an atmosphere where the mind wandered and the body eased into a slower pace, carried by the flow of the crowd. The marketplace was also a place of spectacle. Acrobats and entertainers sometimes performed in the open spaces, delighting children and adults alike. Philosophers, standing on makeshift platforms, delivered teachings to whoever would listen, turning the agora into an open-air classroom. Even the sight of others, moving about their daily lives, became a source of relaxation for those who lingered. To watch the rhythms of life, merchants arranging their wares, neighbors greeting one another, travelers arriving from afar, was to feel part of the larger world without the need for effort. There was comfort, too, in familiarity. Citizens often visited the same stalls, greeted the same merchants, and walked the same paths. This routine gave a sense of stability, a rhythm that was soothing in its repetition. The agro was a place where one could feel both the novelty of discovery and the comfort of habit. Each visit brought new sights and sounds, yet always within the embrace of a familiar setting. Imagine wandering through the agro on a warm afternoon. The sun is softened by the shade of columns, and a breeze moves lightly through the open space. Around you, voices rise and fall, blending into a hum that feels almost like music. A friend greets you, and you pause to share a few words. A storyteller nearby begins to recite a tale, and you linger to listen. The scent of honey cakes drifts past, and you allow yourself a small indulgence. You are not hurried. You are simply part of the flow, carried by the marketplace's gentle rhythm. In this simple wandering, there is rest. The Greek agora shows us that relaxation can be found even in the midst of activity. It does not always require solitude or silence. Sometimes it lives in the act of strolling slowly, of observing life around us, of feeling the presence of community. The Greeks understood that the marketplace was not merely about trade, it was also about connection, conversation, and the pleasure of belonging to a shared space. In their agoras, leisure and life merged seamlessly, turning commerce into calm and everyday routines into moments of rest. Among the many ways the Greeks sought relaxation, one of the most distinctive was through walking. Not hurried walks meant to cover ground quickly, but slow, thoughtful strolls through shaded colonnades, gardens, and groves. These walks were not merely for exercise. They were for conversation, reflection, and the gentle unfolding of thought. The very act of walking side by side, at a pace unhurried, became for the Greeks a form of leisure that nourished both body and mind. The philosopher Aristotle gave a name to this way of life through his school in Athens, the Lyceum. Here, students and teachers walked together in covered pathways, discussing ideas while their steps matched the rhythm of their words. Because of this practice, his followers became known as the Peripatetics, the walkers. The tradition showed that relaxation could be intellectual as much as physical, that the simple act of pacing slowly beneath trees and columns could open the mind while easing the spirit. These walks were not lectures in the strict sense, but dialogues, gentle exchanges where questions led to answers, and answers led to more questions. The pace of walking mirrored the pace of thought, steady, continuous, ever rushed. In this rhythm, ideas were given space to breathe. The Greeks understood that the mind was not best nourished in confinement, but in motion, surrounded by air, trees, and sky. To think while walking was to harmonize with nature itself, to let ideas flow as freely as footsteps. Yet it was not only philosophers who enjoyed such strolls. Ordinary citizens, too, found pleasure in walking the colonnades of the agora, the paths of gardens, or the roads that wound through olive groves. Friends met in the cool of morning or evening, taking slow walks while sharing news, telling stories, or simply enjoying each other's company. The act of walking side by side fostered a sense of equality and intimacy. Words came more easily when steps moved in rhythm, when eyes could wander outward rather than lock in direct gaze. Leisure was found not only in the talk, but in the quiet spaces between words, when the sound of sandals on stone carried the silence. The landscape of Greece encouraged such walks. Gentle hills, shaded groves, and winding coastal paths offered beauty at every turn. A walk might lead past temples, fountains, or quiet shrines, each inviting a pause. Pilgrims walking to sacred sites found that the journey itself carried a meditative quality, each step part of the unfolding of devotion. Even in cities, where noise and activity filled the air, colonnaded walkways offered spaces where walking could be both purposeful and restful. Philosophical walks also carried a communal quality. To join others in these discussions was to share not only ideas, but the very act of moving through the world. Teachers and students, friends and companions, strangers who became acquaintances all found in these walks a way to connect. Leisure here was not withdrawal from society, but a gentle immersion in it, a reminder that thought and relaxation could coexist in company. The rhythm of these walks extended beyond philosophy into daily life. Farmers walking their fields at dusk, sailors pacing the shoreline after returning from the sea, women strolling through courtyards with children, all found relaxation in motion. The act of walking slowed the heart, opened the senses, and gave space for reflection. Even without lofty discussion, it carried the same spirit as the peripatetic tradition, that leisure was found in the balance of body, mind, and the world around them. Imagine a Greek evening where the sun lingers low and shadows stretch long across marble colonnades. A group of students follows their teacher, their sandals whispering on stone. They speak of justice, of nature, of the soul, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of their steps. Beyond them, others stroll quietly, enjoying the cool air, exchanging small words, or simply sharing silence. The scene is peaceful, unhurried, infused with a gentle harmony of motion and thought. These philosophical walks remind us that relaxation does not always mean stillness. Sometimes it means allowing the body to move while the mind drifts or sharpens. It means finding ease in rhythm, in companionship, in the openness of the world. The Greeks discovered in walking a form of leisure that required nothing more than time and presence, yet it offered both clarity and calm. Through the peripatetic tradition and through countless ordinary strolls, they wove walking into the fabric of their relaxation, leaving us the reminder that sometimes the simplest movements bring the deepest peace. The rhythm of leisure in ancient Greece was shaped not only by culture, but also by the seasons. Life in the Mediterranean moved with the cycles of summer and winter, with heat and cold, with long days and short nights. Each season carried its own character, its own forms of rest, its own ways of easing the body and quieting the mind. For the Greeks, to relax was to live in harmony with these changes, to adapt their leisure to the gifts of the year. Summer brought warmth that lingered even after the sun set. In these months, leisure was often found outdoors. Courtyards and gardens opened their doors to the night air, and families gathered beneath the stars. The heat of the day gave way to breezes from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and herbs through the streets. Reclining couches were brought into open spaces, lamps glowed gently in the darkness, and conversations stretched into late hours. Children played until their voices softened into drowsiness, while adults sipped diluted wine, their words accompanied by the faint song of cicadas. The night sky, brilliant with constellations, was itself a form of leisure, an endless theater where stories of gods and heroes shone in starlight. To sit beneath those constellations, listening to music or poetry, was to feel both wonder and calm. Summer days carried their own patterns of rest. At midday, when the sun was at its fiercest, activity slowed. Farmers, merchants, and philosophers alike paused in the shade, resting in courtyards or under the branches of trees. Meals were light, often fruits, bread, and cheese, leaving the body unburdened. The hours between morning and evening were filled with stillness, a rhythm that taught the Greeks that rest was not only for the night, but also for the heat of day. Leisure in summer was about softness, soft breezes, soft voices, soft moments of pause between the brightness of the sun and the quiet of the stars. Winter, by contrast, drew leisure inward. When winds swept over the land and nights grew long, the hearth became the center of rest. Fires glowed steadily, their warmth spreading through rooms where families gathered. The crackle of wood, the shifting light against the walls, the gentle warmth upon the skin, these were comforts as precious as any banquet. Around the hearth, people told stories, recited poetry, or simply watched the flames. Food became heartier, with warm stews and roasted meats shared among family and friends. The pace slowed, and leisure took on a deeper intimacy. The home became the sanctuary, and the fire was the heart that drew everyone into its glow. Winter evenings encouraged closeness. Families reclined together, wrapped in cloaks, listening to music or engaging in quiet talk. The cold outside sharpened the warmth inside, making every gesture of comfort more profound. Lamps flickered on shelves, illuminating painted pottery and decorated walls. Children played with simple toys or leaned against their parents, lulled by the steady sound of flames. Leisure in winter was about gathering, about finding peace in closeness and warmth, about drawing the world into a smaller, gentler circle. The seasons also shaped festivals and rituals of leisure. In summer, outdoor celebrations filled city streets with music, processions, and theater. In winter, rituals of the hearth honored Hestia, goddess of the household flame, reminding families that the warmth of the fire was sacred. The turning of the year was itself a rhythm of relaxation, a reminder that life moved in cycles, and that each season carried its own kind of rest. Imagine a Greek summer night in full. The air is warm, but no longer heavy, and the stars are bright above. You recline in a courtyard, a cup of wine in hand, as the sound of a lyre drifts softly through the air. Around you, voices murmur in conversation, laughter rises now and then, and the night stretches unhurried before you. The heat of the day has faded, and what remains is ease, lightness, and wonder. Now imagine a winter evening. Outside, winds sweep across the hills, but inside, the fire glows warmly. You sit upon a couch, wrapped in a cloak, the flames painting shadows across the walls. A family member tells a story, their voice steady, while others listen in silence. The air carries the aroma of food, cooking slowly in the hearth, and the world feels smaller, safer, more tender. Here, leisure is found in warmth, in stillness, in the closeness of home. The Greeks embraced both seasons, understanding that rest was not fixed, but shifting, like the turning of the year itself. Summer gave them the expanse of the night sky. Winter gave them the intimacy of the hearth. Each carried beauty. Each carried calm. To live with the seasons was to live in balance, to accept the gifts of nature, and to find relaxation not in resisting change, but in flowing with it. In this harmony with time, the Greeks discovered leisure that was timeless, carried in the cycles of sun and fire, stars and flame. Not all Greeks experienced leisure in the same way. The rhythms of rest were shaped by wealth, status, and opportunity. For the elite, leisure could be lavish, adorned with perfumes, music, and elaborate banquets. For the everyday citizen, relaxation was often simpler, rooted in the modest comforts of home, community, and nature. Yet whether rich or poor, all shared the human need to pause, to breathe, and to seek moments of ease. The ways in which different groups found rest remind us that relaxation was not a single experience but a spectrum, woven through Greek society in many forms. For the wealthy, leisure was an art. They had homes with spacious courtyards, couches arranged for reclining, servants to pour wine and prepare meals. Perfumed oils were rubbed into their skin after baths, and entertainment was brought into the household musicians with lyres, dancers, and poets who recited verses by lamplight. The symposium, with its wine, conversation, and philosophy, was the pinnacle of elite relaxation, a gathering that combined pleasure with thought. The elite could afford perfumes imported from the East, rare spices, and exotic luxuries that filled their evenings with refinement. Their leisure often carried a sense of display, a way to show their wealth and culture to others, but beneath the display was the same desire for calm and connection. The elite also had the freedom to travel. They visited sanctuaries like Epidaurus for healing, attended grand festivals in Athens, and escaped to country estates where gardens and outdoor retreats offered quiet. They had time to commission art, to watch theater from the best seats, and to discuss philosophy beneath shaded colonnades. Their leisure was expansive, filled with choices that extended beyond survival. For them, relaxation was not only a necessity, but a cultivated pursuit, a part of life meant to be perfected. For ordinary citizens, leisure was humbler but no less meaningful. A farmer, after a day in the fields, might rest beneath an olive tree, eating bread and cheese while listening to the sounds of nature. A craftsman might pause in his courtyard at dusk, oiling his skin after washing away the dust of work, and listen as a neighbor told a story. Families gathered in modest homes, reclining on simple couches, sharing food and conversation as the night settled in. Entertainment might come from a child's laughter, a riddle passed between friends, or the simple music of a flute. Festivals and the theater offered opportunities where class distinctions blurred. In the amphitheater, citizens of all kinds sat side by side, their voices rising together in laughter or silence as stories unfolded on stage. In religious festivals, processions wound through the city with music and song, and the joy of the occasion was shared by all. Even those with little wealth could participate in the rhythm of celebration, finding rest in the collective spirit of their community. The contrast between elite and common leisure was most evident in scale and setting. The wealthy dined on rare foods, drank from decorated cups, and reclined on finely crafted couches. The poor ate simpler meals, shared clay vessels, and reclined on rougher bedding. Yet the essence was the same: a pause after work, the company of family or friends, the comfort of food, drink, and conversation. The differences lay in detail, not in spirit. Philosophers often reflected on this divide. Some, like Epicurus, reminded people that true leisure did not require luxury. A simple meal, enjoyed with friends, could bring as much peace as the finest banquet. Pleasure, they argued, came not from wealth itself, but from the ability to appreciate what one had. This view suggests that the Greeks, regardless of class, found relaxation most deeply not in extravagance, but in harmony, in the balance between effort and ease. Imagine two scenes side by side. In one, an elite household hosts a symposium, couches arranged in a circle, lamps glowing softly, servants pouring wine into painted cups, music drifting as philosophers debate. In the other, a small family gathers in a modest courtyard, bread and olives spread on a wooden table, a child reciting a riddle, the stars shining overhead as they laugh together. Both scenes carry leisure, though shaped differently. Both offer the same release from the demands of the day, the same comfort of human connection, the same sense of being at peace. What becomes clear is that leisure was not the privilege of the few, but the rhythm of all. The elite may have adorned it with luxury, but the everyday citizen found it in simplicity. In both forms, relaxation carried meaning. It strengthened bonds, soothed the body, and reminded people of their place in a world where rest was as necessary as work. In this way, the Greeks showed that leisure was not defined by wealth, but by presence. Whether in perfumed halls or quiet courtyards, relaxation was the act of pausing to savor life. It was the breath taken after toil, the laughter shared at night, the comfort of knowing that even in a world of labor and struggle, there was always time for rest. The ways in which the Greeks relaxed did not end with their own time. Their rhythms of leisure, their practices of balance, their celebrations of body and mind echoed through history, shaping cultures that came after them. From Rome to the Renaissance, and even into our modern world, the Greek idea that rest was not idleness, but a vital part of life continued to inspire. Their legacy of leisure is woven into the very fabric of how later societies learned to slow down, to gather, and to savor life. The Romans, perhaps more than any others, inherited and expanded Greek traditions of rest. They admired Greek gymnasia and theaters, adopting them into their own cities. Yet they made them larger, more elaborate, filling their empire with amphitheaters, baths, and colonnades. The Greek bath, modest and intimate, became a ramang thermae, vast complexes where citizens of all classes could find relaxation in warm water, shaded courtyards, and open-air gardens. While the scale changed, the spirit remained. Bathing was still more than cleansing. It was a ritual of renewal and companionship. The Greek symposium also left its mark. The Roman convivium mirrored the structure of reclining, eating, and conversing, though often with more indulgence. Philosophical debates, music, and entertainment continued to be woven into the rhythms of dining. In both traditions, relaxation was not only about food and drink, but about the flow of conversation and the pleasure of shared presence. The Greek idea that leisure should be as nourishing for the mind as for the body lived on in these banquets, where thought and laughter intertwined. The love of theater carried forward as well. Roman playwrights drew upon Greek models, adapting their comedies and tragedies for new audiences. Amphitheaters filled with laughter or fell silent in grief, just as Greek theaters had centuries earlier. The concept of leisure as communal spectacle survived, reminding people that rest could be found not only in solitude, but also in the shared experience of art. Even philosophy carried the Greek legacy of leisure. The peripatetic walks of Aristotle, the meditations of Plato, and the teachings of Epicurus all echoed through later schools of thought. Medieval scholars, Renaissance humanists, and modern philosophers alike inherited the idea that leisure was a space for reflection, a time when the mind could stretch beyond the tasks of daily life. The very notion of Scholp, leisure as the root of learning, carried forward into schools and universities, shaping education across centuries. Nature as a source of rest, too, was a Greek gift to later cultures. Their gardens and groves, modest yet meaningful, inspired Roman villas, Renaissance courtyards, and even modern parks. The idea that beauty, greenery, and open air were not luxuries but necessities for peace influenced how cities were built and how people sought refuge within them. From the olive groves of Athens to the shaded retreats of later estates, a pattern of finding rest in nature endured. The Greeks also left behind the understanding that leisure was not one thing but many. It could be bathing, music, storytelling, games, or festivals. It could be solitude or company, stillness or movement. This flexibility shaped later cultures' views of relaxation, reminding them that rest was not confined to a single form, but was woven into all of life. The legacy was not about copying Greek practices exactly, but about inheriting their spirit of balance, their belief that life required moments of pause as much as moments of effort. Even today, traces of Greek leisure remain. We attend theaters, stroll through gardens, recline at meals, listen to music at night, and gather at festivals. We bathe not only for cleanliness, but for comfort. We walk for thought as much as for health. We value schools and universities, institutions that grew from the Greek belief that leisure and learning belong together. In countless ways, our own rhythms of rest carry the echo of ancient Greece. Imagine, for a moment, this continuity. A Greek reclining in his courtyard at dusk, sipping wine as a lyre plays nearby, would recognize the spirit of leisure in someone today, sitting in a garden with friends, sharing music and conversation. A philosopher walking the shaded colonnades of Athens would understand the calm sought by someone strolling through a modern park. A family gathered around a winter hearth in ancient times would see themselves reflected in families today who gather by the glow of fire or light, telling stories into the night. The forms change, but the essence endures. The Greeks left us more than temples and art. They left us ways of living, ways of resting, ways of remembering that to be human is to need balance. Their leisure was not an escape from life, but a part of it, woven into its rhythm as naturally as day follows night. In their legacy, we find the reminder that relaxation is timeless, that across centuries and cultures, people have always sought the same calm, the peace of body, the ease of mind, and the joy of shared moments. So, as we close this journey through their world, we see that the Greeks did not simply teach us how to think, build, or fight. They also taught us how to rest. Their legacy of leisure continues to flow quietly beneath our own lives, inviting us, as it invited them, to pause, to breathe, and to savor the beauty of being alive. As our journey through the world of ancient Greek leisure comes to an end, take a moment to let the rhythm of their lives settle into your own thoughts. We have walked with them through shaded gymnasia, reclined with them at symposia, bathed with them in warm courtyards, listened to their music, and sat with them by the sea. We have watched plays unfold in stone amphitheaters, joined festivals in honor of the gods, and followed philosophers as they wandered in thoughtful steps. In every corner of their world, we found the same truth, that rest was not idleness but harmony, a balance between effort and ease. The Greeks remind us that relaxation comes in many forms. It may be found in the quiet comforts of home, in the laughter of games, in the calm of gardens, or in the grandeur of communal gatherings. It may come through thought, through music, through ritual, or through simple silence. What mattered to them, and what still matters to us, is that leisure nourishes the spirit as much as labor strengthens the body. In their way of life, we see that rest is not something separate from living. It is woven into it, giving meaning, beauty, and peace. So, as you drift now toward sleep, let yourself carry the lessons of their leisure. Allow the slow flow of their evenings to soften your own, and let the gentle presence of their rituals remind you that you, too, deserve rest. The Greeks found calm in the balance of life, and that same balance is waiting for you. Before you go, I'd love for you to take a moment to subscribe to this channel, History for Sleep, so you never miss another calming journey through the past. And please share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what parts of history you'd like to hear next. And when you listen, whether it's late at night, in the quiet of the afternoon, or in the early morning hours, your voices guide the stories we tell, and your presence is part of what makes this community so special. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the peaceful world of ancient Greece. May their balance, their rhythms, and their ways of finding calm inspire your own rest tonight. Sleep well, and until next time, may history continue to whisper its gentle stories to you.